Billionaire wife introduced as housekeeper by husband's family at engagement. Her response shocked all. You know what the difference is between me and the rest of your staff? They get paid for their humiliation. The entire ballroom fell silent. 200 of Manhattan's elite sat frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, as they watched a woman in a $10,000 gown remove her wedding ring and place it on the table in front of her billionaire husband. Here I am, she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Yours no more. But how did we get here? How did a woman who once designed skyscrapers end up serving drinks at her own family's party, only to deliver the most savage comeback in high society history? Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Ever been treated like you don't matter by the very people who should love you most? Well, if you think you've had it bad, wait until you hear what happened to Amara Sinclair at what was supposed to be a celebration of love. What she did next didn't just shock everyone in that room. It changed everything. And if you've ever felt undervalued or taken for granted, this story will remind you exactly what you're worth. So hit that like button, because you're about to witness the most epic takedown of toxic family dynamics you've ever seen. This is the story of how a brilliant architect became a servant in her own home, and how one moment of pure courage set her free forever. Let me take you back to where it all began. 5 years earlier, Amara Sinclair was the name whispered in reverence throughout Manhattan's architectural circles. At 32, she had already revolutionized sustainable urban design with her innovative housing projects that somehow managed to be both breathtakingly beautiful and environmentally conscious. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office at Sinclair Designs, illuminating the scale models of her latest creations. Her assistant knocked gently on the door. Ms. Sinclair, the mayor's office is on line 1. They want to discuss the Brooklyn waterfront project. Amara smiled, adjusting her tailored blazer as she reached for the phone. Tell them I'll take it in 5 minutes. I want to finish reviewing these sustainability reports first. This was her world. A world where her opinion mattered, where city planners sought her expertise, where her designs would house families for generations to come. The Sinclair Foundation, her nonprofit organization, had already provided affordable housing for over 3,000 families across New York. But everything changed the night she met Nathaniel Rosewood at the Metropolitan Museum's annual gala. The Grand Hall buzzed with conversation as Manhattan's most influential figures mingled beneath priceless works of art. Amara stood near a Monet, discussing urban planning with the city's housing commissioner, when a voice behind her made her turn. Excuse me, but aren't you the architect who designed the Riverside Gardens complex? She turned to find a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Tall, impeccably dressed in a custom tuxedo, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see right through her. But it wasn't his looks that caught her attention. It was the genuine admiration in his voice. I am, she replied, extending her hand. Amara Sinclair. Nathaniel Rosewood, he said, taking her hand and holding it just a moment longer than necessary. I have to tell you, what you've done with sustainable architecture is remarkable. I drove through Riverside Gardens last week, and I was amazed. You've created something that's both beautiful and meaningful. For the next hour, they talked about everything from green building techniques to the social responsibility of architecture. Nathaniel listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely fascinated by her work. You know, he said as the evening wound down, I'd love to continue this conversation over dinner. Would you be interested? Amara found herself saying yes before she could think twice. Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant in the village, far from the pretentious establishments where most wealthy New Yorkers conducted their courtships. Nathaniel had chosen it specifically because, as he put it, I want to get to know the real you, not the public figure. Tell me about your childhood, he said over candlelit pasta. What made you want to build things? Amara smiled, twirling her linguine thoughtfully. I grew up in a small apartment in Queens with my grandmother. She used to tell me stories about the buildings around us, about the families who lived in them, the dreams they held. I realized that architecture isn't just about creating structures. It's about creating homes, communities, hope. That's beautiful, Nathaniel said, and she could see he meant it. My family has always been focused on business, on profit margins and market shares. I've never met anyone who thinks about their work the way you do. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened. Nathaniel would surprise her with thoughtful gestures. He'd show up at her office with coffee and pastries when she was working late. He'd attend her foundation's fundraising events, not just as her date, but as someone who genuinely cared about her cause. I've been thinking, he said one evening as they walked through Central Park. What if we could combine your vision with my family's resources? Imagine what we could accomplish together. It was exactly what Amara had always dreamed of hearing. Someone who not only supported her work but wanted to be part of it. 6 months later, Nathaniel proposed on the rooftop of a building she had designed, with the Manhattan skyline stretching out behind them. Amara, he said, dropping to one knee as the sun set over the city, you've shown me that success isn't just about what you accumulate. It's about what you create, what you give back. I want to spend my life building something beautiful with you. The ring was stunning, but it was his words that made her say yes. This was a man who understood her, who valued her dreams, who wanted to be her partner in every sense of the word. Their wedding was a fairy tale. Held in the garden of the Rosewood estate, it was elegant but not ostentatious, meaningful rather than merely expensive. Amara wore her grandmother's pearls with her designer gown, a symbol of where she'd come from and where she was going. Vivian Rosewood, Nathaniel's mother, had been gracious during the engagement, praising Amara's accomplishments and welcoming her to the family. Even Nathaniel's father, the stern patriarch of the Rosewood business empire, had seemed genuinely pleased with his son's choice. You're exactly what this family needs, he had told Amara during their engagement party. Someone with substance, with purpose. Nathaniel is lucky to have found you. For the first year of their marriage, everything seemed perfect. Nathaniel encouraged Amara to expand her foundation. He attended every groundbreaking ceremony, every ribbon cutting, every award presentation. When she won the National Architecture Prize for Sustainable Design, he was the first person she called. I'm so proud of you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You're changing the world, one building at a time. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. It started with small comments. Do you really need to work such long hours? He'd ask when she stayed late at the office. We barely see each other anymore. Then came the suggestions. Maybe you could delegate more to your team. You don't have to personally oversee every project. When she was invited to speak at an international conference on sustainable architecture in London, Nathaniel's response surprised her. London? But that's the same weekend as Mother's birthday celebration. You know how important family is to her. It's just one weekend, Nathaniel, Amara said, looking up from her laptop where she'd been reviewing her presentation notes. This conference could lead to projects that house thousands of families internationally. I understand that your work is important, he replied, his tone patient but firm. But family has to come first sometimes. Mother has been planning this celebration for months. Amara felt a flicker of unease, but she pushed it aside. Marriage was about compromise, wasn't it? She declined the London invitation. The pattern continued. Gradually, Nathaniel began to express concern about her obsession with work. He worried that she was burning herself out and suggested she might be happier, focusing more on their home life. I've been thinking, he said one evening over dinner at their penthouse apartment. What if you took a step back from the day-to-day operations of your firm? You could still be involved, but maybe more as a consultant. It would give us more time together. Step back. Amara set down her fork, studying her husband's face. Nathaniel, Sinclair Designs is my life's work. I can't just step back. I'm not asking you to give it up entirely, he said quickly. Just to find a better balance. We're married now. Shouldn't we be building a life together? The conversation continued late into the night, with Nathaniel painting a picture of a different kind of life. A life where she could still pursue her passion for architecture, but where their relationship, their family, came first. "Think about it," he said, pulling her close as they lay in bed. "We could travel together, spend more time at the estate, maybe start thinking about children. Isn't that what marriage is supposed to be about?" Over the following months, the pressure intensified. Nathaniel's family began to echo his concerns. Vivian would make comments about how devoted other wives in their social circle were to their husbands and families. "I worry about you, dear," she said during one of their weekly lunches. "You're always so stressed, so busy. Nathaniel tells me you're working 12-hour days. That can't be healthy for a marriage." "My work is important to me, Vivian," Amara replied carefully. "It's who I am." "Of course it is, darling. But you're also a rosewood now. That comes with certain responsibilities, certain expectations." The expectations became clearer as time went on. Amara was expected to attend every family function, every social event, every business dinner. When she tried to decline because of work commitments, Nathaniel would become distant and cold. "I don't understand why your projects are more important than supporting your husband," he said after she missed a crucial business dinner to oversee the groundbreaking of a low-income housing development. "It's not that they're more important," Amara tried to explain. "It's that this groundbreaking was scheduled months ago. 50 families are depending on this project. And I'm depending on my wife to be there when I need her," Nathaniel shot back. "But apparently, that's too much to ask." The guilt was overwhelming. Amara began to question herself, to wonder if she was being selfish, if she was failing as a wife. She started declining projects, delegating more responsibilities, trying to be the supportive spouse Nathaniel seemed to need. But it was never enough. When she won another prestigious award, Nathaniel's congratulations felt hollow. "That's wonderful, darling," he said without looking up from his phone. "Just remember we have the Pembertons' dinner party tomorrow night. Try not to talk about work too much. It makes people uncomfortable." "Makes people uncomfortable?" Amara stared at him in disbelief. "Nathaniel, I just won the International Prize for Innovative Design. This is the biggest honor in my field." "I know, and I'm proud of you," he said, finally looking up. "But you have to understand, not everyone finds architecture as fascinating as you do. People want to have fun at parties, not listen to lectures about sustainable building materials." Each conversation chipped away at her confidence, her sense of self. The woman who had once commanded boardrooms full of city officials now found herself apologizing for her passion, minimizing her achievements, shrinking herself to fit into the box Nathaniel and his family had created for her. The final blow came during their third anniversary dinner. Amara had been hoping to discuss a new project, an innovative community center that could serve as a model for urban renewal. Instead, Nathaniel had an announcement of his own. "I've been thinking about our future," he said, raising his champagne glass. "About what we want our life to look like. I think it's time for you to sell Sinclair Designs." Amara nearly choked on her champagne. "Sell my company?" "Think about it rationally," Nathaniel continued, his voice taking on the patronizing tone she'd grown to hate. "You're not happy. You're constantly stressed, always worried about deadlines and budgets. Wouldn't you be happier if you could focus on being my wife, on building our family?" "Nathaniel, my company isn't just a business. It's my legacy. It's how I'm changing the world." "And you've done amazing things," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "But maybe it's time to let someone else carry that torch. You could still be involved in charity work, maybe join some boards. But as my wife, as a rosewood, you have other responsibilities now." That night, as Nathaniel slept peacefully beside her, Amara stared at the ceiling and wondered how she had gotten here. How had the man who once celebrated her ambition become someone who wanted to erase it entirely? The answer came to her slowly, painfully. Nathaniel had never really loved her for who she was. He had loved the idea of her, the trophy of being married to a successful, accomplished woman. But now that he had her, now that she was his wife, he wanted to reshape her into something more manageable, more conventional. Over the following year, the transformation accelerated. Nathaniel made it clear that her continued involvement in her company was causing problems in their marriage. The Rosewood family began treating her less like an accomplished professional and more like an accessory to their son's life. "Amara, dear," Vivian said during one particularly painful family dinner, "I've been thinking you might enjoy getting more involved in our charitable activities. The Rosewood Foundation could use someone with your organizational skills." The condescension was barely veiled. Amara's internationally recognized expertise in sustainable architecture had been reduced to organizational skills. But the final insult came when she discovered that Nathaniel had been telling people she was taking a break from her career to focus on their marriage. When she confronted him about it, his response was devastating. "I'm trying to protect you," he said. "People were starting to talk, saying you were more interested in your buildings than your husband. I thought it would be better if they understood you were making a choice to prioritize our relationship." A choice. Amara's voice was barely a whisper. "Nathaniel, you've systematically isolated me from my work, my friends, my entire identity. How is that a choice?" "You're being dramatic," he replied dismissively. "I've supported your career. But marriage requires sacrifice, Amara. I thought you understood that." The word sacrifice hung in the air between them. Because that's what it had been, wasn't it? She had sacrificed everything that made her who she was, and for what? For a man who saw her as a possession to be managed rather than a partner to be cherished. But the cruelest irony was yet to come. As Amara's professional life crumbled, the Rosewood family's financial situation became increasingly precarious. Nathaniel's father had made a series of bad investments, and the family's real estate empire was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. It was Amara who quietly used her connections, her reputation, and ultimately her own money to save them. She leveraged her relationships with city officials to help them secure lucrative development contracts. She used her architectural expertise to redesign their failing properties, making them profitable again. She even secretly invested her own savings, the money she had earned from years of successful projects, to keep the Rosewood empire afloat. But she did it all quietly, without fanfare, because she still believed in the man she had married. She still hoped that if she proved her loyalty, her value to the family, things would go back to the way they were in the beginning. Instead, her contributions were ignored, minimized, or attributed to Nathaniel's business acumen. The family that owed their continued prosperity to her genius and generosity treated her like an expensive ornament, beautiful to look at but ultimately useless. And now, 3 years after she had saved their empire, Amara found herself in the ballroom she had personally designed, wearing a gown her husband had chosen, serving champagne to guests who had once sought her professional expertise, while her mother-in-law introduced her as just the housekeeper. The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the marble floors as Amara adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist. The same bracelet Nathaniel had given her on their 3rd anniversary, back when he still looked at her like she hung the stars. Tonight, that bracelet felt like a shackle as she prepared to serve champagne to guests at his nephew's engagement party, a role his family had assigned her with cruel precision. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had personally designed every detail of this ballroom. Every arch, every window, every carefully planned sight line had been her vision, created during the early days of her marriage when she still believed she was building a home rather than a prison. "Darling, who is that exquisite woman serving the champagne?" Mrs. Pemberton, the bride-to-be's mother, whispered to her husband as Amara glided past their table. Her voice carried the refined accent of old Boston money, the kind of breeding that Nathaniel's mother, Vivian Rosewood, desperately craved association with. Vivian's lips curved into a smile sharp enough to cut glass. This was her moment, the opportunity she had been orchestrating for months. The chance to finally put Amara in what she considered her proper place. "Oh, that's just our housekeeper," she announced loudly enough for half the room to hear. "She insists on helping with these events. You know how the help can be, always trying to feel important. The word sliced through Amara like a blade dipped in poison. She had shared intimate family dinners with these people, had comforted Vivian through her health scares, had even designed the woman's private study as a surprise gift. She had saved their family from financial ruin, had sacrificed her own career and identity for their approval. Yet here Vivian was, reducing her to nothing more than hired help in front of the very people whose respect the Rosewood family desperately sought. Amara's hand tightened on the silver tray, but she continued moving through the crowd with practiced grace. The black silk gown she wore, a Valentino that Nathaniel had chosen for her, suddenly felt like a costume in someone else's play. A housekeeper. Mrs. Pemberton's voice carried across the room with surprise. But she's so elegant, so refined. Are you quite certain? Vivian's laugh was like shattering crystal. Oh yes, quite certain. She's very good at pretending, though. I'll give her that much credit. The conversation continued around her as if she were invisible, each word another nail in the coffin of her dignity. But it was Nathaniel's voice that delivered the killing blow. Amara. His voice boomed across the ballroom, calling her like one would summon a servant. Come here, sweetheart. Mrs. Pemberton was asking about you. The endearment dripped with condescension as Amara approached the head table where her husband sat with his family and their distinguished guests. Nathaniel looked devastatingly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, his smile bright and charming. But Amara could see the cruel glint in his eyes that others missed. The same look he'd worn when he'd systematically isolated her from her friends, her work, her very identity. Mrs. Pemberton, I'd like you to meet my wife, Amara, Nathaniel said, the word wife barely audible as he emphasized it with mocking undertone. Though as mother mentioned, she does insist on playing housekeeper at our family gatherings. The blood drained from Amara's face. Her own husband. The man who had once written her love letters comparing her brilliance to the sun. The man whose family she had saved from bankruptcy. He was publicly reducing her to hired help at his nephew's engagement party. Your wife. Mrs. Pemberton looked confused, glancing between Amara and Vivian. But I thought you said she was. She is whatever we need her to be, Vivian interrupted smoothly, her eyes never leaving Amara's face. Aren't you, dear? Your staff here tonight, just like any other evening. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Amara could feel dozens of eyes on her, could hear the whispers starting to spread like wildfire. These people, architects and city planners who had once sought her expertise, socialites who had competed for invitations to her dinner parties, were now witnessing her complete destruction. That's right, Nathaniel added with a chuckle that made Amara's soul shrivel. She only brings food for the family anyway. That's about all you're good for around here, isn't it, Amara? And that's when it happened. The moment that would change everything. The serving tray slipped from Amara's numb fingers, crashing to the marble floor with a sound like thunder. Crystal glasses shattered, sending champagne and canapes across the pristine white marble she had personally selected during the manor's renovation. The entire ballroom fell silent except for the tinkling of broken glass. Clean that up, Vivian commanded coldly. And try not to make another mess. Our guests didn't come here to watch the staff have a breakdown. Amara slowly bent down and began picking up the larger pieces of broken glass, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grasp them. A bead of blood appeared where a shard cut her finger, bright red against her dark skin, a stark reminder of her humanity in a room full of people who had forgotten she possessed any. Careful there, Nathaniel said mockingly. We can't have you bleeding all over the marble. Mother just had it cleaned. That was when something inside Amara finally snapped. She stood up slowly, the broken glass falling from her hands to crash again on the floor. When she raised her head, her eyes were no longer filled with hurt or confusion. They burned with something far more dangerous. The fire of a woman who had finally remembered her own worth. You know what? Amara said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. You're absolutely right. Nathaniel's smile widened, thinking he had finally broken her completely. "I'm glad you're finally seeing reason. I am staff here," Amara continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I've been cleaning up your messes, serving your needs, and maintaining this family's reputation for years. But you know what the difference is between me and the rest of your staff?" The room held its breath. "They get paid for their humiliation." Amara reached down and pulled off her wedding ring, the stunning emerald-cut diamond that Nathaniel had placed on her finger with promises of forever. She held it up so everyone could see it sparkling in the chandelier light, the same light that illuminated the architectural details she had so lovingly designed. "Here I am," she said, her voice ringing with newfound power as she placed the ring on the table in front of Nathaniel. "Yours no more." Nathaniel's smile vanished like it had never existed. The silence in the ballroom was so complete that Amara could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Around them, the cream of society sat frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, as they witnessed what would become the most talked-about moment in their social circle's history. "Amara," Nathaniel said slowly, his voice stripped of its earlier mockery. "What do you think you're doing?" The question revealed everything about their marriage in 6 simple words. Not, "What's wrong?" or, "How can I help?" or, "I'm sorry," just the assumption that she was doing something to him rather than freeing herself from what he had done to her. "I'm doing what I should have done a long time ago," Amara replied, her voice steady as steel. "I'm returning something that never really belonged to me anyway." Mrs. Pemberton leaned forward in her chair, her eyes bright with interest. The older woman had been watching the entire scene unfold with growing horror and fascination. "My dear, you have nothing to apologize for. If anything, we owe you an apology for sitting silently while my family put me in my place." Amara's laugh was bitter but strong. "Oh, Mrs. Pemberton, they did exactly that. They showed me precisely where I stand in this family, and for that, I'm actually grateful." The murmurs around the room grew louder. Guests were beginning to pull out their phones, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The bride-to-be, a young woman named Catherine, looked mortified as she realized her engagement party was becoming the backdrop for a family implosion. Nathaniel finally found his voice, panic creeping in as he began to realize the magnitude of what was happening. "Amara, you're being dramatic. It was just a little fun, a harmless joke. You know how family gatherings can be. Harmless." Amara's eyebrows rose elegantly. "Is that what you call it when you tell your friends that your wife is only good for bringing food? When your mother calls me staff in front of your nephew's future in-laws? When you all stand by and watch me pick up broken glass with my bare hands while you laugh?" The color drained from Nathaniel's face. Around the room, guests began whispering among themselves, and Amara could see the horrified looks they were giving the Rosewood family. These people might be wealthy and privileged, but they still recognized cruelty when they saw it. "Do you want to know the funny thing about all this?" Amara continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. "I actually thought I belonged here. I thought if I just tried harder, loved more, gave more of myself, that eventually you would see me as part of this family instead of an outsider who happened to marry into it." "You are part of this family," Nathaniel said weakly, but even he didn't sound convinced. "No," Amara shook her head, her voice filled with a clarity that surprised even her. "I was a convenience. Someone to manage your social calendar, to make your house run smoothly, to smile and nod and never complain no matter how badly I was treated. I was the perfect wife as long as I remembered that I was really just high-class hired help." A woman at a nearby table gasped audibly. It was Mrs. Harrison, the wife of a prominent judge, someone who had known Amara during her professional heyday. "Wait a minute," she said, standing up. "Aren't you Amara Sinclair? The architect who designed the Riverside Gardens complex?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Vivian's face went white as she realized what was about to happen. "I was," Amara said simply. "Before I became whatever it is I am now." "You designed Riverside Gardens?" Mrs. Pemberton's voice was filled with awe. "My daughter lives there. She's always talking about how brilliant the design is, how it's changed urban living. You're that Amara Sinclair. She was, Vivian interjected quickly, trying to regain control of the narrative. But that was a long time ago. She's focused on family now. Focused on family? Mrs. Harrison looked incredulous. But you won the International Prize for Innovative Design just 2 years ago. I remember reading about it in Architectural Digest. The article said you were revolutionizing sustainable urban development. The room erupted in whispers as people began to realize who Amara really was. Phones came out in earnest now, with guests frantically Googling her name and sharing what they found with their tablemates. Oh my God, someone whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. She's the one who designed the Manhattan Community Center. And the Brooklyn Waterfront Project. She's famous. Nathaniel looked like he was going to be sick. This was not how this evening was supposed to go. The plan had been simple: put Amara in her place, show their guests that the Rosewood family maintained proper hierarchy, and enjoy a pleasant evening celebrating his nephew's engagement. Instead, he was watching his wife, his internationally acclaimed architect wife, reveal to 200 of Manhattan's most influential people exactly how his family had been treating her. Nathaniel, Mrs. Pemberton said, her voice sharp with disapproval, are you telling me that you've had one of the world's most respected architects serving drinks at your family gatherings? It's not like that, Nathaniel stammered. Amara chose to step back from her career. She wanted to focus on our marriage. I chose. Amara's voice cut through his explanation like a knife. Is that what we're calling it now? She turned to address the room, her posture straight and dignified despite everything that had happened. Ladies and gentlemen, since we're all being so honest tonight, let me share some truth with you. Vivian finally erupted. How dare you? After everything this family has done for you, after the life we've given you, this is how you repay us. With this dramatic little scene in front of our guests. The life you gave me. Amara turned to face her mother-in-law with a smile that could have frozen fire. Vivian, I think you're confused about who gave what to whom. She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. 3 years ago, the Rosewood family was on the verge of bankruptcy. Bad investments, failed developments, mounting debts. They were about to lose everything. Amara, stop, Nathaniel hissed, but she continued as if he hadn't spoken. I used my connections to help them secure city contracts. I redesigned their failing properties to make them profitable. I invested my own money I had earned from my architectural projects, to keep this family afloat. The Rosewood Empire exists today because of my expertise, my reputation, and my bank account. The silence in the room was deafening. Even the catering staff had stopped moving, frozen in place as they listened to this revelation. But did I get credit for saving the family business? Amara continued. Of course not. That would have been inappropriate. After all, I was just the wife. Just the woman who was supposed to smile and look pretty and never, ever overshadow her husband. Mrs. Pemberton looked absolutely scandalized. You saved their business and they treat you like hired help. Oh, it gets better, Amara said, her voice gaining strength with each word. Do you want to know what Nathaniel told people when I won the International Prize for Innovative Design? He said I was taking a break from my career to focus on our marriage. He was embarrassed that his wife was more successful than he was. That's not true, Nathaniel protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Amara pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her messages. Should I read some of the texts you sent me when I was invited to speak at the London Architecture Summit? The ones where you said I was being selfish and putting my ego before our marriage? Nathaniel's face went from pale to green. Amara, please. Not here. Why not here? She asked. This is where you chose to humiliate me. This is where your mother chose to call me the help. This is where you decided to tell 200 people that I'm only good for bringing food to the family. She looked around the room again, her gaze settling on the young couple whose engagement they were supposed to be celebrating. "Catherine, James, I'm sorry your special evening has become about this. But I want you to learn something from what you're seeing tonight." The young woman nodded, her eyes wide with shock and sympathy. "Never, ever let anyone make you smaller than you are," Amara said, her voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "Not even the people who claim to love you. Especially not the people who claim to love you." She picked up her small evening clutch from the table where she'd set it earlier, when she still thought she was a welcome member of this family. "I'll be collecting my things and leaving tonight. I'm sure you'll be much happier without the burden of having me around." "Amara, wait." Nathaniel finally stood up, reaching for her arm. "You can't just leave. We're married. This is your home." Amara looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. For a moment, just a moment, she saw a flicker of the man she had fallen in love with. The man who had once celebrated her achievements, who had promised to build a beautiful life with her. But that man was gone, if he had ever really existed at all. "Is it?" she asked quietly. "Because for the last few hours, you've all made it very clear that I'm not family. I'm not your wife. I'm just staff. Well, consider this my resignation." She pulled her arm free from his grasp with deliberate care. "Don't worry, Nathaniel. I'm sure you'll find someone else to bring food for the family." The whispers around the room were growing louder now, and Amara could see several guests pulling out their phones to record what was happening. By tomorrow, this story would be all over their social circles. The Rosewood family's reputation for elegance and sophistication would be replaced by whispers about how they treated the wife who had just walked away. "You'll be back," Vivian said venomously, her composure finally cracking completely. "Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? You need us more than we need you." Amara paused at those words, turning back one final time. When she spoke, her voice carried across the room with quiet authority that commanded attention from every person present. "Vivian, that's where you're wrong. You see, you've spent so much time telling me what I am and what I'm worth that you never bothered to find out who I really am." She gestured around the ballroom, at the soaring ceilings and elegant archways. "This room? I designed it. The lighting that makes everyone look so beautiful tonight. I planned every fixture. The acoustics that allow you to have intimate conversations while music plays. I calculated every angle. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The Riverside Gardens complex that Mrs. Harrison mentioned. That houses 3,000 families and has been featured in architectural magazines worldwide. The Manhattan Community Center that serves 50,000 people a year. The Brooklyn waterfront project that transformed an entire neighborhood." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I built all of that. Me. Not the Rosewood family. Not Nathaniel. Me. And you know what? I can build it all again." Mrs. Pemberton began to clap, slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. Other guests joined in, until half the room was applauding. The sound echoed off the walls that Amara had designed, creating a symphony of support that she hadn't heard in years. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I don't need your applause. I just needed to remember who I am." She looked around the room one last time, taking in the shocked faces, the barely concealed excitement of those who loved a good scandal, and the growing horror of the bride's family as they realized what kind of people they were about to align themselves with. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for witnessing my liberation. I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening." Amara walked toward the ballroom doors with her head held high, her spine straight, and her dignity intact. Behind her, the room erupted in chaos as guests began talking all at once, their voices a mix of shock, outrage, and barely contained excitement. She reached the doors and paused, her hand on the ornate brass handle she had personally selected during the renovation. Without turning around, she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, and congratulations to the happy couple. I hope your marriage is nothing like mine. As Amara stepped out of the ballroom and into the marble foyer beyond, she could hear Nathaniel calling her name, his voice desperate now, pleading. But she didn't turn around. She didn't look back. The sound of her heels on the marble floor echoed through the grand hallway like a countdown to the end of everything the Rosewood family thought they knew about power, control, and the woman they had just lost forever. The next morning, Amara's phone wouldn't stop ringing. The story of her dramatic exit from the Rosewood engagement party had spread through Manhattan's social circles like wildfire. Videos taken by guests had been shared on social media, and by dawn, #Amara Sinclair was trending on Twitter. She sat in her hotel suite, still wearing the black Valentino gown from the night before, scrolling through the messages flooding her phone. Interview requests from major news outlets. Invitations to speak at conferences. Job offers from architectural firms around the world. And hundreds, thousands of messages from women sharing their own stories of feeling diminished by the people who claimed to love them. "You inspired me to leave my toxic marriage," read one message. "Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. I've been hiding my success to make my husband feel better about himself," read another. "Not anymore. My mother-in-law treats me like hired help too. Watching your video gave me the strength to stand up for myself." But it was the call from her former business partner that made her smile for the first time in months. "Amara? It's David. I've been watching the news, and I have to ask, are you ready to come back?" David Chen had been her partner at Sinclair Designs before she'd stepped back to focus on her marriage. He'd begged her not to leave, had warned her that she was making a mistake. But he'd also promised that if she ever wanted to return, her place would be waiting for her. "The Riverside Gardens project is up for expansion," he continued. "The city wants to replicate it in 5 other boroughs. They specifically asked for you. Not the firm. You." Amara closed her eyes, feeling something she hadn't experienced in years, excitement about her future. "When do we start?" she asked. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Amara threw herself back into her work with a passion that surprised even her. It was as if the years of suppressing her ambition had created a dam that had finally burst, releasing a flood of creativity and energy. She moved into a penthouse apartment in Tribeca, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city she was helping to reshape. The space was modern and clean, filled with light and possibility. It was the opposite of the oppressive grandeur of the Rosewood estate. The Sinclair Foundation, which had been dormant during her marriage, roared back to life. Donations poured in from people who had been inspired by her story. Architects and urban planners from around the world reached out, wanting to collaborate on projects that would house families and strengthen communities. But it was the personal messages that meant the most to her. Women who had left toxic relationships after seeing her example. Young architects who had been inspired to pursue their dreams despite family pressure to choose more traditional paths. Mothers who had decided to return to careers they'd abandoned for marriage. "You showed me that it's never too late to reclaim your life," one woman wrote. "I'm 55 years old, and I just enrolled in law school. Thank you for reminding me that I'm more than just someone's wife." Meanwhile, the Rosewood family was dealing with the fallout from that night. The video of Amara's speech had been viewed millions of times, and the public reaction was overwhelmingly supportive of her and critical of them. Nathaniel's business ventures began to fail as partners distanced themselves from the family. Vivian was quietly dropped from several prestigious charity boards. The society pages, which had once celebrated the Rosewood family's elegance and sophistication, now whispered about their cruelty and entitlement. The engagement party that was supposed to showcase their social standing had instead revealed their true character to the world. Nathaniel tried repeatedly to contact Amara, leaving voicemails that ranged from angry to pleading to desperate. But she never responded. She had said everything she needed to say in that ballroom. 3 months after that fateful night, Amara stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new office, watching the city wake up beneath a canopy of soft morning clouds. The view encompassed the skyline she was slowly transforming with her architectural vision, buildings that prioritized both beauty and sustainability, structures that would house families and nurture communities for generations to come. Her phone buzzed with yet another interview request. Since her dramatic exit from the Rosewood Manor, Amara had become something of a phenomenon. Her story had resonated with women everywhere who had felt diminished by the people who claimed to love them. But more importantly, her return to architecture had been nothing short of triumphant. The Sinclair Foundation had already broken ground on 5 affordable housing projects. Her innovative designs were being studied by urban planners worldwide, and her TED Talk on Building Dignity, Architecture as Social Justice had been viewed over 10 million times. The morning newspaper lay open on her desk, featuring a small item in the society pages: Rosewood family faces social exile following daughter-in-law's dramatic departure. The article detailed how the family's reputation had crumbled in the wake of Amara's public revelation of their treatment. Nathaniel's business ventures were failing without her connections to support them, and Vivian had been quietly dropped from several prestigious charity boards. But Amara felt no satisfaction in their downfall. She had moved beyond revenge to something far more powerful: indifference. They no longer had the power to hurt her because she no longer gave them the power to define her worth. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Sinclair. Your 10 a.m. appointment is here. Send him in, please." The door opened to reveal a man she didn't recognize, tall, with kind eyes and an easy smile that reached all the way to his soul. He wore a simple but well-tailored suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. "Ms. Sinclair. I'm Dr. Marcus Rivera. I run the community health clinic in the Riverside district. I was hoping we could discuss your housing project there." As he spoke about his work with underserved communities, about his vision for integrated healthcare and housing, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced in years: genuine connection with someone who shared her values, her passion for making a real difference in the world. "The families in our neighborhood need more than just affordable housing," Dr. Rivera explained, his eyes lighting up as he described his vision. "They need a community. A place where children can play safely, where seniors can gather, where people can access healthcare and education and hope." "That's exactly what I believe architecture should do," Amara replied, leaning forward in her chair. "Buildings aren't just structures. They're the foundation for human flourishing." For the next 2 hours, they discussed plans for the community center that would anchor her housing development. Dr. Rivera had ideas about integrated services, about creating spaces that would serve multiple generations, about building not just homes but hope. "I have to ask," he said as their meeting wound down, "what made you decide to focus on affordable housing? Most architects at your level are designing luxury condos and corporate headquarters." Amara smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. "I learned that the most beautiful thing you can build is a life of purpose. And purpose means using your gifts to lift others up, not to make yourself feel important." "That's beautiful," Dr. Rivera said, and she could see he meant it. "I'd love to continue this conversation over dinner, if you're interested. I know a great little place in the village that serves the community we're hoping to help." For the first time since her marriage had ended, Amara felt her heart flutter with possibility. Not the desperate need for validation that had driven her to Nathaniel, but the healthy excitement of meeting someone who saw her as an equal, a partner, a force for good in the world. "Dr. Rivera," she said, extending her hand with a smile that was entirely her own, "I think this could be the beginning of something beautiful." As they shook hands, Amara realized that her story wasn't ending with her liberation from the Rosewood family. It was just beginning. She had reclaimed not just her independence, but her capacity for love, real love, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. The woman who had once picked up broken glass while her husband laughed was gone forever. In her place stood Amara Sinclair, architect, philanthropist, and finally, completely, magnificently herself. The ring she had returned was just a symbol. What she had truly given back to the Rosewood family was their ability to define her worth. And in doing so, she had set herself free to build something far more beautiful than any mansion, a life of her own design, filled with purpose, dignity, and the promise of love that honored rather than diminished her light. Outside her office windows, the city stretched endlessly toward the horizon, full of possibilities waiting to be built, communities waiting to be served, and a future that belonged entirely to her. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever been made to feel small by people who should lift you up, remember Amara's story. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to see yourself. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from people who can't see your value and build a life with those who can. Subscribe if you believe in second chances and the power of knowing your worth, because everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, and everyone has the strength to reclaim their life when they're ready to remember who they really are.